How do I deal with the shame that shows up when someone else sees the real me, the parts I was
Mm.
always told were unlovable?
So interesting. So the core wound, I am unlovable, is a core wound that we see very, very often in folks who are anxious, preoccupied, or fearful avoidance, leaning anxious. So yes, that would have been it's often with I am unlovable, I am bad, I am not good enough. It's sort of like in that theme there. So shame Shame is an interesting one. I think that we all have shame first recognized, but shame really is an indicator of where you need to put a little bit more emphasis on your healing, right? So, shame is one of those things that if you run away from it, it will follow you. Like you cannot outrun shame. So how do we deal with the shame when somebody sees all the parts of us? First, recognize that the shame that we feel is self-imposed. What we think would be incredibly shameful and we carry a lot of shame for, if you were to tell the story to someone else, 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to go, "That's the worst you got. Let me tell you a story." Right? Right? But in our mind, we tend to really sort of make it bigger than it is. Um, Someone who truly wants to connect with you on a safe emotional level is not going to add to your shame. They're not going to judge you. So the shame that you feel is self-imposed most of the time. If you have someone in your life who is being critical, judgmental, who's actively trying to shame you for things, you absolutely should take a look at, why are they in my life? What role are they playing? Why am I ascribing them this level of access to me or level of trust? Because that's not acceptable behavior, right? Trying to induce shame and constantly bring something up is usually for the purpose of manipulation of some sort, right? So we're going to kind of put that aside, right? So if I'm trying to get you to behave in a way that I want, one of the ways I can do that is I can shame you, right? It's manipulation. So if you see that there's someone close to you in your life who's constantly shaming you, ask yourself, why am I giving them this level of access? That's the first thing. But the second thing is that more often than not, the shame is being self-imposed. You're imposing, the shame on yourself for something you said or did or whatnot. And so I think you just need to own it. If that feeling is coming up really, really strong and it's attached to, a wound of I am defective, meaning like if someone finds out that A, B, and C is actually true about me, then they too will realize that I'm defective. This shame wound, is actually the top core wound for a dismissive avoidant, which is very interesting because they often dealt with overly critical parents or parents that dismiss them or parents who are very judgmental. They do develop at some point in time early on that there is something wrong with them. There's something wrong with me because, if I wasn't this way, my parent would love me, they would pay attention to me, they would give me love or whatnot. So that wound is often connected to a fear of rejection. So not just a fear of abandonment, which is slightly different, but a fear of judgment and rejection. So this is a wound that we carry from our childhood. Recognize that, if you can sort of tie it back to a couple of things that you heard repeatedly or felt repeatedly as a child, it'll become obvious to you why you developed that wound, and then you can help heal that wound, right? Shame is, or I fear that if someone sees my true self, that I'm going to get rejected. This is just like any other core wound, right? So, yeah, fearful avoidance have a core wound like I fear I will be betrayed, right? So, and then the anxious preoccupieds have a core wound. Like we said, I fear I will be abandoned, or I am bad, I'll be excluded, I'll be alone, I will be unloved, like all of these things. So they trace back to moments in time. And so as an adult, you can trace it back and go, okay, my child brain made the best sense of it could at the time, but now I know that this is no longer serving me. And so, okay, I have some shame that I maybe I don't think I'm very good at certain things, right? Maybe I'm afraid maybe I carry shame over the fact that I think that I'm not good at relationships. That's sort of a big one for dismissive avoidance, right? You'll actually hear them say, I'm not good at relationships, right? So, like, I'm just defective. Like, there's just something wrong with me. I just don't do relationships well, right? And that shame sort of builds over time as they get older. Like, why aren't you married? Or how come you haven't had a girlfriend? Or what's and so this shame builds, right? But a lot of that again is self-imposed. If you believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, that you can't do a relationship properly, then you're going to keep perpetuating that shame. So where does that come from? It generally comes from, a pattern of being highly criticized, judged, left alone a lot, not taught how to connect with others on an emotional level. And so you learn to do life alone. You learn to really just depend on yourself. And you develop a high degree of trust in yourself and a very low degree of trust in others. And so, this is the pattern that has formed that maladaptation. So the shame component, just like anger, which are connected, is simply just giving you information of where you still need to heal. So how
Yeah,
do you deal with it?
exactly.
You acknowledge it. You acknowledge that it's there. First, identify the source, right? So if it's you
Hmm.
self-imposing the shame, then you work on it. If the shame is being
Right.
imposed purposefully and repeatedly by someone else, take a good hard look at that. Why are you allowing that person such a degree of access
Yes.
to you? So identify the
Yeah.
source of the shame and then, you know, uh address it. Don't ignore it. Just shame really you'll never outrun shame.